Why am I blurry? Hello? Foiled by technology. G'day friends. Today we have a very special episode. Very special episode usually means somebody's gonna die. That's not happening today. Today we have a special episode. The much anticipated Pimp My Chemise. Now this is what the chemise looks like after a consultation with Mum. As you can see, we've got a few pins in here. That's because Mum gave me a fitting. One thing we both noticed from the last chemise video, I was swimming in it. It was too large. Either I hadn't gathered it down enough, or I could have gotten away with a smaller size. We're going to be unpicking all of the seams on the yoke, and I'm going to have to regather this. Mum was not too happy with this. She was convinced that I had seamed on the wrong side, and I would have expected her to be correct because that looks so much nicer. But the directions were to seam wrong side to wrong side and flip up, which leaves you with this lovely little mess right here. Now I think the whole idea behind this is that you are supposed to leave this here, and I should have done the same with the edge seams. You flip them in, cover them with lace and with ribbon. Personally, I'm not sure I like that aesthetic, so what I'm going to be doing is ripping some of this apart, and we're going to bling out the yoke, put it back together, and try to make it look as pretty as possible. Before I left, Mum went through her lace stash and gave me some old beading she'd stored away. Might come in useful for another project. She also loaned me a couple of books and suggested a couple of techniques. My mum is awesome. Everyone needs an expert sewist like her in their back pocket for emergencies. We'd all prefer to not have to seam rip, but when it happens, having a good YouTube video or a movie to watch is always good. Or listen, as the case may be. I had to take off my glasses to focus on the small stitches. I reran the gathering stitches. The first time I did this, I sewed the 2 rows by hand. I've since gotten to know this machine better. I can offset the needle to the left or right of center by a small range of millimeters, so I just have to line up the edge of the fabric down the center of the foot. I just adjusted the needle to different distances from that center point. Then I regathered. These gathers are a lot tighter than the originals due to the machine governing my stitch length. I thought I'd make a game plan for the yoke. Thankfully, archive.org has copies of old ladies' magazines from the turn of the century, so I've been ogling catalogs like Strawbridge Clothier's and Butterick's Delineator for examples. Essentially fashions from the 1880s through the early 1900s. I don't think I'm alone in wanting Butterick to reissue the Delineator in hard copy. I doodled out a bunch of examples with insertion and pin tucks, even smocking, before I remembered that I have a lace fabric that I could use on the yoke. That central idea helped solidify my plans. I dug out my pattern and cut another set of yokes from the lace. I'm going to overlay the lace fabric on top of the cotton. I like the idea of the pale lilac showing through as a background. It beats doing insertion of a lace that might etch. You see, I have sensitivity issues when it comes to textiles. Mum could tell you stories about me throwing tantrums over a sweater or a lace camisole being picky on my skin, not just in childhood either. There are just some textures I can't wear without any kind of buffer layer, like a lining or a t-shirt. I sewed the appropriate pieces right side together along the top end. Then I turned the right sides out and pressed for a finished edge. Now we can treat the cotton and the lace as one yoke piece. I pinned the yokes to the body of the chemise, right sides together this time per mum. If you're using this seaming method, this would be a great time to add any lace edging you would want to use. I didn't. We'll get back to that in a bit. I sewed the yokes back into place using a 1/4 inch seam. All seam allowances are on the inside. Time to finish the edge of the neckline. Going to need to do some more hand sewing. Technically, I could call it a day right there. We have everything in place, and despite the house being chilly enough to warrant a long-sleeved shirt, the chemise fits fine. It gaps a little bit in the back, and there are a couple of places where the chemise wants to form its own side bust darts in the front, but that could be due to some of my size adjustments. It's annoying, but I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. If I decide to use this pattern again, I may go down a size. Chances are pretty good, though, that I'll just wing the next chemise of this era. Anybody got an extra 3 or 4 meters of linen they don't need? You know that's not where we're leaving things, right? It's called Pimp My Chemise for a reason. First, we're going to do a little housekeeping. I can't have that seam allowance with the raw edge of the lace yoke front right against my skin. It would irritate the bejeebers out of me. Nope, we're gonna cover it. Remember how I said at the beginning that the instructions want you to put those seam allowances on the front? If that were the case, I wouldn't be doing this. I'd be pinning down the seams to the front and encasing them with the ribbon. Maybe sandwich a little lace edging between the seam allowance and the ribbon. I'm not saying it would be perfect, but it's an option, and that's the beauty of a fairly simple pattern like this. Once you have an idea of how it goes together, you can make choices. Maybe not the choice the pattern maker wanted me to make, but we've already determined I've got some issues with authority. I placed and pinned my ribbon to hide the yoke seams. I considered adding some lace around the edge, but decided against it. I'd have to continue it up the sides of the yoke, and it would likely fight with the beading that's going to go around the neckline. And now, more hand sewing. I'm back up in my little home office watching a video on a screen that's larger than a tablet and using my magnifying lamp as it's easier on the eyes. I'm using a running back stitch just to be sure everything is stable. Pretty sure a running stitch alone would have been fine. I'm stitching along both edges of the ribbon. Yes, the thread matches the ribbon on purpose. It's less noticeable that way. And now the moment we've all been waiting for. Hand-crocheted lace around the neckline. If this lace looks familiar, that's because I showed you how to make it in a previous video. And yes, the thread color matches the lace because I want my stitches to be as invisible as possible from the front. So that's my chemise all pimped out. I've got lace, ribbons, and hand-crocheted trim. Honestly, I think the thing that took the most time was the crochet, eclipsed only by my regaining the will to live after all that hand sewing. Actually, the hand sewing wasn't all that bad. I'm just horribly out of practice, so this isn't bad work for a beginner or someone who hasn't done any serious garment construction in the past 15 years. A tad slow, but not bad. I'm not sure if the pattern is unnecessarily complicated for what it has to do or whether I've just made it that way. The machine sewing certainly went faster this time around. Of course, I'd already finished the hem and the edge around the arms, so that helped. My bra is showing, isn't it? If I made it again, I might experiment with pin tucks or smocking on the front, maybe do a little lace insertion. Maybe. Definitely sacrifice some length so I don't have to run any seams at the shoulders. But as I said earlier, I'll probably make one using the centuries-old method of hand sewing together basic shapes. I can now say that between this chemise and the original ill-fitting 16th century chemise, I have tried both methods and I'm pretty sure the older method will work just fine. If I have the right width of fabric, leave off the sleeves, and refine the armholes, that is. At least with the gored old school method, I won't have to worry about the pattern being too wide or too tall in comparison to the width of the fabric. As it stands right now, it's pretty. It's functional. In due time, we'll see how it stands up to wear under a corset. For now, it is what it is. Isn't that just the motto of 2020? It is what it is. What do you think? Do you think I've given this pattern a fair shake? I know there are some folks who would say that at my size I should feel lucky there's even a pattern that fits me. Those folks are jerks, by the way. Everyone deserves clothes that fit, and there have been plenty of stout people through history who would agree with me. Probably would have frozen to death if not for the basic human right to warm clothing. I'm looking at you, McCall's, Butterick, Vogue, and Simplicity. Your sizing leaves a lot to be desired. Though I think that's a problem I may need to solve by learning how to alter, upscale, and draft patterns. Something to work on. If you've enjoyed this video and you haven't already, why not click the subscribe button? There's one over to your right, or down below near the thumbs up button, and a very handy bell that will allow you to decide whether you want reminders whenever I post new content. All three of those buttons are very useful and worthy of exploration. If you want all the info on the patterns I used for this project, links are in the description below this video. There's also a link to a special page if you want to follow me on all the socials, or check out my poor, semi-abandoned blog, or find me on Ravelry. It's all there in one place. I'm going to continue working on my Edwardian project, but in the meantime, I think I need to go knit a sock.